Welcome to my neighborhood, where I'll interview several industry luminaries and interesting people who are changing the state of the art in accounting software technology. Some of my guests are CEOs of leading corporations that you may have already heard of, maybe you're already using their products, or I think will soon be using their products, as well as some interesting thought leaders who help us learn more about technology and how to put it to use. Today I'm joined by Reid, the CEO of Intacct Corporation, a cloud financial management software company that has been consistently recognized as one of the top companies in the marketplace. Rob was recently named by Glassdoor as the highest rated CEO for 2014 in the SMB category. And during his tenure at Intacct, the company has consistently been recognized for excellence, including one of the best places to work in the San Francisco Bay Area for 2012, 2013, and 2014. And Red Herring named Intacct to its list of top 100 global companies in 2013. With more than 30 years' experience in the software industry, Rob has a proven track record of driving explosive growth at innovative companies. And he has demonstrated a deep expertise in bringing cloud computing to the world of business applications. Welcome to the neighborhood, Rob.
Hey, thanks, Doug. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's just great to have you here. And I've known you for some time now.
Mm-hmm.
We're actually fellow Pleasanton residents
That's
here
right.
in California in the Bay Area.
That's right.
And Intacct is located, the company that you run, in San Jose.
That's right, downtown San Jose.
Commute. Yeah, cool. Well, what I'd like to do today is just kind of talk with you a little bit about kind of what drives you, what drives your success, because I think our audience are always looking for, you know, what can they learn from these real success stories that we have here in the neighborhood. And so I just have some questions for you. Basically, how would you characterize what led you into the whole profession of leadership in software? What led you there?
You know, Doug, I've always looked for innovation and new things, and was at an early age sort of driven into understanding about technology because it just seems sort of cool. And I was lucky enough to be able to introduce the Apple computer into education. I went on and started Zenith Data Systems, which at the time was one of the biggest PC manufacturers back in the late 70s. Hate to even say that, early 80s, and we grew to be number 3 behind IBM and Apple, and got to grow that from 0 to $1.5 billion in 5 years.
Wow.
So that was a lot of fun, and I was like, boy, you can have fun at work and make some money. It seemed like the right thing to do, so I stuck with it.
Yeah.
But I was concerned about the commoditization of hardware, so that's what then pushed me into software, and I've been doing software for the last 30 years.
Well, that's interesting. I just learned something. You were at Apple.
I actually wasn't at Apple.
You were a dealer or what?
I was with a company. I was a Fortune 500 company called Bell and Hall.
Oh, okay.
And we did microfilm, microfiche, projectors, Canon cameras. We distributed Canon cameras, and I saw that this whole digitization was going to erode our business.
Yep.
And so I went to the president when I was 25 years old and said, we got to be concerned about what's happening on the digital side. It's going to eliminate film. Right. And the president looked at me like, what the heck do you know? Yeah. And I started, going to lunch with him and explaining, what I was envisioning. And at 25 here, I was talking to the president of a Fortune 500 company, and he said, okay, go figure it out for us. So I went out and explored, because we didn't have any electrical engineers. We had optical engineers, mechanical engineers, but electrical engineers, who were they?
Yeah, it was all analog back then.
Everything was analog,
film,
right?
And chemicals.
So I was lucky enough to then be able to go out to California and down to Texas, and I talked to all the original PC manufacturers. And because we were going to have to OEM to get into the business, because we also had big education business too. And I came back, and this was in 1977, and said, I found this little company, you're not going to believe the name, but they're out in Cupertino, and I think they've got the best product. And I think that's what we should use as our base. We'll OEM that product and take it into both business and into education. So I got to work with Mike Markolo, the original
Sure.
chairman and VP of marketing, and he's the guy that put the money behind jobs in Washington.
First investor.
And he's a great guy.
Yeah, yeah.
And we took them through our vision of OEMing their product and going into education, and they actually weren't going to go after education.
Right.
So they're like, cool, if we can get students using Apple, then when they grow up, they'll buy Apple. Sounds like a good strategy. It's not something we're going to do. You go ahead and do it.
Wow.
So we use federal funds to go in, and we walk into a principal in a school and just say, if you sign these 2 agreements, we'll get the funds from the feds, and we'll start putting Apple computers in the back of your classrooms. And so that year we sold 22,000 Apple computers. When they sold 50, the first year they sold 50,000. So we sold them. Now, 2 years later, Bell & Howell was having difficulty, exactly what I had projected, that the business was actually going to start slowing down. It did. And so I moved on to start Zenith Data Systems, and Apple then went in and took all those dealers that we had created, and they made them Apple dealers, and then that's how Apple had that mainstay. And actually, I think the education market got them through the hard times in the 90s.
Well, absolutely. Well, you know, I was at Apple, and it was now '86 when I joined, so much later. The Mac was already there, but Apple's success is largely due to the educational focus. We were so rabid about getting products. We called them seeded, like growing seeds, machines that would go into education, and then you're right. Just teach if they learn computers from Apple, they'll probably use them after they graduate.
It's really funny because I probably spent 6 months investigating and understanding, pulling together the business plan, making presentations. So Mike Markolo and I then came back to present to the board of directors, and we were in Chicago. It was in December. There was no moisture. We gave the presentation. We knocked them off their chairs and then I said, okay, now Mike's going to come on up and give you a demo of the Apple computer, because at that point it had only been out for 4 or 5 months. Hardly anybody had even seen one. He goes and he touches the keyboard, and static electricity rippled through and blew up the computer. And I'm sitting
still
there.
Early.
I was like, oh my gosh, all that work just went down the drain because of static electricity. So the board just turned to us and said, guys, you can leave now. And Mike and I walked outside of the boardroom, and we're like, oh man. And Mike was just shaking his head going, well, Rob, I'm really sorry. I really thought that we were going to be able to pull this off. Board pulled us back in 10 minutes later and said, let's go. And I don't think I'd ever been more surprised. And it did work out to be a wild success.
I'll say, yeah. Well, so who in your life, I want to kind of switch gears a little bit, who's influenced you the most? And maybe Mike Markolo, but who are some of the folks, maybe it's a teacher at school, that has influenced who you are today, what kind of profession you decided to pursue? Who would that be?
I'm going to go so traditional. I got to tell you, it was my mom.
Yeah.
In business, you're always trying to strive for being smart and figuring out how to make a profit and beat the competition. And my mom was but it's all about people. And she drilled into me the golden rule.
Yeah.
And treating others the way you want to be treated. I actually now call it the platinum rule. I don't know, maybe that's sacrilegious, I don't know. But it's like the mainstay. Right. Because if you treat people well, they're going to respect you, they're going to want to do business with you, and more importantly, you're just going to enjoy each other. So I can remember her telling me, even when I started right out of school, you make sure when you go on in, you treat everybody with respect in the same way. It doesn't matter if they're a janitor or they're the chairman.
Right.
You want to make sure that they understand that you're looking for a long-term relationship, and you'll take your shirt off your back to help them if they need it.
Yeah. That totally resonates with me, because it's certainly how I try to live and how I judge. In fact, when our people at the Sleeter group, they say, which companies do we work with? We always, no matter how the technology seems, because that's sort of the business that we both live in here, it always comes back to the people. Good people make great products, they treat their employees right, they treat their customers right, they'll probably succeed. and be there, 10 years down when we've already opted into their product.
Yeah, what's really interesting about what you just said is that most people that go to business school, they teach you, you know what, if you don't have the money, you can have great ideas,
Right.
but if you don't have the money, you can
Right.
never deploy that. So you've got to go figure out how you convince investors and draw funds in so you can create this vision that you have. And then you got to sell it, so you got to make sure you take care of your customers. And then you have to also really make sure that your employees understand the values and how you take care of your customers in an appropriate manner. And I think that's totally upside down and wrong.
Sort of backwards, huh?
It's totally backwards.
Yeah.
If you find great people, they will know that they can do the right things for their customers. And if you do the right things for the customers, all sorts of money will flow on in. And if you have great people, when you have ups and downs in your business, they'll figure out a way to get through it.
Yeah.
So even if maybe you're starting to run out of money, great people will figure out ways to draw in money so that you can continue to be successful.
Yeah.
So I think it was totally upside down. And obviously I'm an older guy now, so I don't know exactly what they're teaching in B school, but I know it used to be, that was it, and I think it's totally wrong.
Yeah, it's probably still much about the analytical marketing, it's things that aren't about so much about people, and I think that's what certainly at the Sleeter Group we're all about trying to promote is the people side of things. So tell me about a lesson that you've learned over life, and I want to know the one that took you the longest to learn. You just never quite got it.
The one that I don't think I got fast enough was follow the money. So the very first time I heard follow the money, it was like, okay, if you're going to be successful, money is the measure. So, go into a profession where you think you can make a lot of money.
Right.
And it had nothing to do with following the profession. It had everything to do with, unfortunately, for good and bad, the way money flows is usually how you can figure out what's really going on.
Yeah.
So how many reports have been put out about, oh, this is really good for your body, or this is really bad? And when you follow the money, you find out there was a pharmaceutical firm that was behind this independent study that totally had influenced it. Or even in our industry, this is the best accounting software according to the Institute of CPAs. Right. And there isn't an Institute of CPAs, somebody funded it. So I think it took me too long because I was brought up in an environment where you never lie, you never mislead, and I don't think I realized that there is bad in our world, and it's usually driven by somebody trying to figure out how to make more money.
So you would advise me to be more skeptical of things I read?
Yeah, I would. And I would try to get to the root, who sponsored or who put that information out, and what was their motivation. Right. It took me a little bit too long to figure it out because I used to believe a lot of things.
Yeah.
When I found out where it was coming, the information was coming from, and it was tainted, it caused me to open up my eyes more and be more observant of what's really going on in the world. So it's not just about business. It's really what's going on in the world.
Yeah, that's fascinating, Do you think most people are, by nature, good?
Yeah, I absolutely do. In fact, I thought everyone was good, and unfortunately, there's 3 to 5% that aren't.
Yeah. And
those people taint our world, and a lot of the reasons why we have the laws that we have is because of the unfortunately that minority.
Small group. Yep. So when you wake up in the morning, what do you know?
I know that I've got great opportunities before me, and I know that I'm going to seize the day and enjoy it, and help others enjoy it.
Yeah, that's great. So I want to talk a little bit about your career. You've risen to the top management positions in several large companies, and you've started companies. Did you start out early in life saying, I'm going to seek the top position everywhere I go, I want to be the top boss, or has that just sort of organically happened because you were in the right place and you focused hard? Why are you always the top guy?
So, as I was growing up, my dad and my uncles, when we'd get together on the weekend, the family would get together. I know in many families they talk about sports, or they'll talk about what the kids are doing, or whatever. I would sort of sit at my dad's knee and listen to him talk about business. And I was enthralled as to the way they were developing their business, or what was going on with the competition, or the changes that were going on from government regulation, and it just sort of inspired me that this was something that I really wanted to get into and be successful in. And my family, in an entrepreneurial type of spirit, all of them were pretty darn successful. So, like many of us, I wanted to be as good as Dad, or better than Dad. So, I was like, I had goals at 18 as to what I wanted to be doing when I got out of school, 25, at 30 years old, at 35 years old, at 40 years old, and at 55 years old.
Really? Okay, so you really are a planner. You really do think ahead. You really plot out your...
Yeah, most people that know me pretty well say I'm a chess master. And in fact, in college, I won. I played chess, and I won at my school. So I plan things out 6, 7, 10 moves ahead. And I try to think with the end in mind in everything that I do.
Right.
And then, so if that's what we're trying to achieve, what are the stages that we have to get to get to that point? So you first have to step back and say, so what is the end in mind?
Yeah.
And then how do we get there the most effective way?
Right.
So that's allowed me to get to this point. And other than the last one, which was 55, that 55 goal was be retired by 55. I actually did retire, but it was past 55, and then I came back because I had this opportunity at Intacct that I was like, this is just too big.
Just got to do this.
I got to do this, and
it
has been. It's been a great ride.
Well, and the company has done extremely well since you have been there. I was involved with Intacct all the way back in 2000 when many of your predecessors were there. And
Dave Thomas.
And the company had just incredible vision and was just ahead of its time. I tell all the companies in the space, NetSuite at the same time, NetLedger it was, it was great ideas, well implemented, ahead of its time, but none of us inside the industry thought it was ahead of its time. It was totally obvious. We would be doing SaaS software. We wouldn't be running applications on our PCs ever in the next 3 years that we'd be gone. I predicted this in 2000. I was totally wrong, but not directionally. I think directionally we were right all the way back then.
Well, but there's right brain and left brain. So you took the analytical approach, and you were absolutely right. There's the emotional side. And I mean, the great thing about the profession is that everybody in the profession is pragmatic.
Yes.
Everybody in the profession has unbelievable amounts of integrity, and it's any threat of not having data being secured scares people, and that I'm going to go on in and make sure everything is going to work.
Yeah.
It has to always work. Everything has to be black and white.
Yeah.
And so there was the fear.
Absolutely.
So that was the issue that I think happened in the very beginning. It was this fear of how are we going to make sure that everything works, everything we've had before is there, and there isn't any security issue.
Yeah, that is so right. I have been, even today, we're still struggling as the accounting profession to convert clients to this new thing called the clients, or convert our own firms. Maybe that's usually the first step. But it's still such a struggle because you can list out all the things you do business process wise. And you say, okay, I'm going to go to the cloud with all of these business processes. Well, that's, again, intellectually easy to think about. But then when you say, oh, but if it breaks my web store, or if it breaks my process in my inventory control or something, then I could not accept that. It would be a negative instead of a positive. We know that it's the right place to go, but getting there is still that very difficult step, and I know you deal with this every day when new clients come on.
Yeah, I think the industry overall just didn't do as good a job as it could have, especially on the security side of things. So, it's very logical for people to think, well, you know what? If I have a computer here, and I'm good, and I back it up, and then I have another backup computer,
right? I'm
secure.
Yeah,
it's in my own four walls, and I know what I'm doing. I don't know what that other company is going to do for me that's out there in the cloud. What I don't think we did as good a job as we should have is, hey, we're putting these computers in a hardened data center. It can handle an earthquake up to 8.0. Okay. There are armed guards, literally armed guards out in front. Nobody's getting in. It's biometrics to come on in. Not only do we have redundant systems, we have redundant networks. We have 24/7 people from an operational perspective. We have a hot backup site in another location so that you can be coming on up. And we're able to do that at a low cost because we're distributing, an Intacct part over 7,300 companies.
Yeah. So what's the most difficult part of running a company the size you're running now?
I think it's keeping everyone aligned to the mission, the objectives, the things you're trying to achieve, and the trade-offs of making sure that we are doing everything we can to make customers successful. So there are just so many dimensions in a fast-growing organization that have to happen simultaneously. Keeping all those gears working jointly together as you're adding hundreds of people, and making sure they understand what's important, what to prioritize, and how to treat customers and their fellow employees. Getting that all together takes ongoing work. And you can set up your mission, you can set up, here are the values we believe in, but you have to walk them, and you have to make sure, you have to walk your talk, and you have to make sure that everybody embraces. And with bringing in lots of people with different experiences and different cultures, you have to migrate them to the culture that works for you.
So when a strategy isn't working, do you double down or do you shut it down?
If a strategy isn't working, I seek to understand and start asking lots of questions of lots of people. Because earlier in my career, so my whole career, I've been lucky enough to be responsible for the strategy of the company I've been with. So since I was 25 years old till now, I've had that responsibility. And I always thought that if you have a bad strategy, you can never be successful. So strategy is king or queen, whichever you think, whoever's the ruler of that. And what I learned over time is that actually is wrong. So I used to think strategy was 70%, execution was 30%. Then I went, okay, if you don't execute well against the strategy, so you can have a great strategy, you don't execute well, you still can fail. So we started migrating it, it was 50-50, then it was, okay, 30% strategy, 70% execution. And I still had an element of the overall equation not even considered, culture. So Peter Drucker, and I didn't get this in school, I read this after school, used to say that culture eats strategy for lunch and probably breakfast. And it gets back to this point we were talking about a little bit earlier, is that if you have great people working as a team together, they can overcome execution issues or strategy issues. But getting those people all working together. So if they're a crew team, when you're pulling, if one crew member in a crew team isn't at the same cadence, the boat starts to go off course. And what you've got to do is you've got to get everybody working together. And that's still an art. That's still an art. And I end up spending, and I've spent a lot of time at Intacct, making sure that our culture is there, that so all teammates are working together. So every person in the company has objectives, and their objectives tie back to the overall strategic intent and objectives that we have as a company.
Yeah. So, but things aren't working.
So if things aren't working,
quite answer it. Yeah.
So if things aren't working, guess what?
Yeah.
Because you've created a culture of curiosity.
Right.
You created a culture of it's important for you to help the company be better.
Right.
So our strategy isn't working. We look to come from the bottoms on up.
Right.
Here are the things that we need to improve upon, or here are the issues
Right.
that we're having and why we're not things
Right.
aren't working. And guess what? When you get everybody thinking about it,
Right.
it's unbelievable how fast you can change
Right.
it.
So, but some
And
companies
getting then people to agree on what the issues
right.
are.
Yeah. And
So we do Pareto weighting. So Pareto weighting is, I give you $100. Tell me what are the biggest issues that we got going on. You can put 100 cents on one thing if you think that is the issue.
okay.
You could spread it, 70 on this, 30, 10. Usually what happens in a complex business is that there are so many things
Right.
that people go, well, we got this wrong, and then we got this issue, we got this issue, we got this issue.
Right.
And they're like, stop, let's prioritize it. So in your opinion, tell me what it is. Now,
Right.
we'll do that in a group. And what you look at is where there are wide variances. So
Right.
let's just say that you and I both say, here's 70 points and this is the most important thing
Right.
for us to focus on to try to
Right.
try to improve.
Right. Right.
We probably wouldn't discuss it.
Mm-hmm.
But if I say something's 80 and you say it's only 20 and everybody else is 50,
Right.
you and I will debate.
Then those are the times when you really focus on conversation.
And we try to
Right.
figure out, why do I think it's an 80 and why do you think
Yeah,
it's only a
yeah.
20? Usually something will come out of that will cause the other people to start changing their vote.
Right.
So you could say, well, I had a terrible experience and here are all the issues
Right.
associated
Mhm.
with this, and I just don't think this is going to help us moving forward. It's not an issue. It's not going to resolve that issue. I gave it a very low rating. And I'll come back in and say, I think it's the most important
Yeah.
issue, and here are all the reasons why. And then we look at each other and go, what did I just learn from that?
Yeah, that's great. So I don't know. I'm reminded of Larry Ellison or Steve Jobs or whatever. You've worked for Larry.
And I worked with Steve.
And Steve and those kind of leaders really are much more every
Autocratic.
detail autocratic. It's like my way or highway. Bill Gates too. Obviously, they've succeeded quite well. Are you saying that the culture is benefits when you do the collaborative, involve everybody, bottom up kind of management?
What I learned years ago is I rarely am the smartest guy in the room.
Mm-hmm.
If you've done a good job as a leader,
Right.
you've hired people that are smarter than you.
Yep.
Is Larry Ellison smart? Unbelievably smart. Was Steve Jobs smart? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens when those people leave? They haven't created a legacy to be able to have the
Right.
company be successful. So great leaders try to develop the organization so
Right.
they can go on without them.
Yeah.
I did have the privilege of working with Larry, and I'm fearful for Oracle down the road as to
If
who's
he's
going
not there, yeah.
He's not there.
Yeah.
We would go into meetings, and Safra Katz would just tell all of us around the table, just do whatever Larry tells you to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I was taught, no, it's my responsibility. When I was younger, it was called followership. I
Right.
should be going on in and projecting, here's what I think. If I was the boss, this
Yeah.
is what I would do. And then
Yeah,
get
take
the input
ownership.
and take
Yeah,
ownership
yeah,
for it.
yeah, yeah.
And then after we made a decision, go off and execute against
Mhm,
it. Over at Oracle, it's just do what Larry says
Yeah,
you
yeah,
should be doing.
yeah,
So
that's interesting.
that's I don't think that's a sustained business. Now it's a multi-billion-dollar.
Well, can you argue with it?
Yeah.
I know, but
it's going to be interesting
do.
to see. Now,
Yeah,
a
we'll
lot
see.
of people are talking about what's going on in Apple.
Yeah.
Is Apple lost its innovation
Yeah.
ability? And that's going to be very interesting because Steve didn't create that. I mean,
Well,
Steve
yeah.
was a difficult guy to work
yeah,
for. I
everybody
mean,
agrees there.
some things were, today you're insanely great and tomorrow you're a jerk.
Yeah, and you're fired.
And you're fired.
I was there at Apple in between Steve, so he was gone already, and
Yeah.
he had not yet come. So John Scully era.
Yeah.
But I still think there's that DNA that he implanted into the company back then that we all still pretty much lived by. It's just this sort of insane pursuit of excellence that we just couldn't. Everything just had down.
And that's the reason they're the most valued. Company in the world, or second, wherever they are right now. He did get that in place, but still, he was probably more autocratic than he probably needed to be. If he had allowed everybody else to blossom, just like at Oracle, instead of just do what Larry says, it's we have 10 great minds thinking about this, and let's take it to a whole other level. So let's listen to Larry and then build upon that, as opposed to just doing what Larry says.
So I just have one last question for you. When you're gone, what do you hope that everybody will say about you? That really how you changed their life, what impact you had on their life. What do you hope people say about you?
I hope that people say that he made my life better. I think that we're here to improve the world. And we should be trying to strive for how did we make a difference? And that's at every level. How did I make a difference with my family? How did I make a difference in my community? How did I make a difference within business? Philanthropically, how did I help the culture? And so making a difference. So I hope people say something like, he reached for the stars and he touched them. That'd be great.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thank you.
We'll see you on the road.
Alrighty, sounds good.
Good luck to you.
Alrighty.
So thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you next time.